Paul and I have been in a conversation about this for weeks, so it's not like Paul didn't just come on the air like Howard Beale and blow up the podcast. We've been talking about this for a while. So the framing of this is there's going to be a little bit of a pivot, a little bit of a rebrand on My Favorite Sings, and it's going to be coming in a few weeks. The artwork's done, the title's done, the plans are done.
Can I tell our listener the name of the new show?
Show tunes with lyrics where skill never wobbles, no wrong emphasis on errant syllables, lively discussions of songs, queens and kings. This is the podcast My Favorite Sings. Rather than dissing what Broadway's rewarding, I'll give a listen to Goldsmith and Gordon. They'll dissect musicals, arrows and slings. Here on the podcast My Favorite Sings. When the show bites, when the rhymes suck, when the crafts regressed, I go to the podcast My Favorite Sings, where David and Paul know best.
So, Paul, welcome to My Favorite Sings.
Can we tell the listeners what just happened?
Yes, there's a book I'm reading called I Was Better Last Night by Harvey Fierstein. And it's very apt to this moment because I forgot to hit all the record buttons before we actually started, and we were about 10 minutes into the podcast. And boy, we had a great first 10 minutes there that no one will ever hear, right?
No, we heard it ourselves. Basically, I talk to you all the time, so I don't care.
Yeah, it was as it was coming out of our mouths. It was just like so good. And then at some point I realized, oh, wait, there's an extra button I need to push and had not gotten pushed. So now we're just going to completely start again. We're not even going to try to recreate the magic. We're just going to create new magic, Paul.
Okay.
That's what we're going to do.
Take it away, David.
Paul, welcome back to My Favorite Sings.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
We missed you last week.
I missed myself.
You were on vacation. That's now a matter of public record.
Yes, I was on vacation in my hometown of Los Angeles.
Did you have a good time? I saw some photos. They look disturbingly happy. I gotta say.
Great time. Got to see all my old friends. Was really wonderful. Glad to be back in New York City.
I'm glad to have you back. We missed you. Our friend John Kavanagh, the great composer, filled in your stead. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to that podcast, that episode.
Well, I think, David, you might be aware that I've never listened to any of these podcasts. But I might one day. And when I do, I will start with the podcast you did with John.
Right, because you really don't want to listen to yourself.
I hear myself now. Why would I need to listen back to this?
That's
Who would
fair.
hear this again?
No, listen, I have to listen to them again because I edit them.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
No, but I'm truly...
Let me ask you this. How many listeners do we have, David? Do we have 11 or 12?
He knows who he is.
Okay.
He knows what he did.
All right. Can I ask you another question?
Sure.
Will we be making money on this podcast anytime soon?
I've been reading up on my YouTube analytics, and yes, and you know what, Paul?
How much do podcasters make?
Once we've hit about 300,000 followers who've liked and subscribed, and by the way, if you're listening to this and you like what you've heard over the last 7 episodes, remember to subscribe to this this podcast.
That's very smart, David, because the podcasts that I do listen to, the ones that I like, they do mention to subscribe.
It's a thing. You got to subscribe. So while you were gone, I was at the Connector concert.
How did that go?
As I said to Jason Robert Brown, it was my Super Bowl. I was more excited about it. If there had been merch, I would have been adorned in Connector merch, but there wasn't. But it was
wait. Yeah. There were no Connector hats or no Connector.
No, not that I saw.
Did you discuss this with Jason, like why there were no T-shirts or hats?
You know what? I'm gonna have to follow up with an email.
Yeah. Okay, because I couldn't be there, of course, because I would have been your date.
You would have been.
But I'm really bummed because obviously I love the show, saw the show, get depressed when I hear the CD, which in a good way. So yeah, I would have loved to have seen that.
It was beautifully done. They had basically the entire original cast back, so I got to, and I missed the show when it was running. and I was just bereft to have missed the show when it was running. And it was like that experience I had when Elaine Stritch came back to the Neil Simon Theater to perform Ladies Who Lunch in her show at Liberty. It was like on the same stage as Company. I got to see Elaine Stritch perform The Ladies Who Lunch. So it was like being in a time capsule and being back in 1970. It was like that for me because I got to see,
Wow.
yeah, the company that I'd just been listening to on this recording incessantly, going up to the microphones, and they did have music stands. They didn't really need them, of course, but it looked beautiful. It sounded incredible. I looked later at the credit list, and Jason had, I think, something around for that concert, 8 sound personnel, like between the designer, the associate designer, the mixer, the engineer, and the sound crew for a concert. And I thought about you because I thought, as the composer, sound is really, as the lyricist, it is so important. And it's certainly at a concert, it's important. And I think we give so little attention to the technicians. Thank God
Mhm.
there's a Tony nomination or a Tony Award for them. But
Yeah, I find live sound just to be so problematic in general. So I'm glad to hear that the sound was good.
the sound was impeccable. And what Daisy Prince did was she's the original director and she staged the reading with every word of the book. So it was, I know some people are very baffled by my passion for this material, and they needn't be. It really has to do with just the craft of that score, which I just find to be so thrilling and so impeccable.
When you say people are baffled, what does that even mean? Like, whose opinion would you possibly respect? Who that score baffles me. That I don't give a shit if it baffles you
Yeah,
personally.
I think there's an amalgam of factors as to what happened there with that show and why isn't it on Broadway and why didn't it break through all the way to the success that it
Well,
deserved.
I'll tell you why, because the music is incredibly sophisticated, incredibly great. And the Broadway community in general right now, I don't know, they don't hold music in that high a regard, in my opinion. And there I said it. They are not bookables, they are not lighticals, they're not productionables, they are musicals. And you'll notice on the Tony Awards in the last, whatever, 15 years or so, only once in a while is the score even on the show. So let's just be real. Musicals with great sophisticated scores can break through. The Band's Visit, Light in the Piazza, some of Jason's shows have broken through. But in general, Broadway doesn't have open arms to sophisticated music and music that doesn't have 4 chords. And it sounds great because it's familiar because you've heard that song a million times, just in a slightly different form. There's a reason why Stephen Sondheim was not accepted in the Broadway community when he first started writing music. It went over everybody's head. And then it wasn't until later where his musical prowess educated the ears of Broadway audiences so that they could be accepted. In my opinion, music has been dumbed down in the last 10, 15 years. And there are still brilliant, sophisticated scores that Adam Gettle is writing, that Jason is writing, and that other composers that we love. And there's room for everything, of course, but I'm irritated that music is not revered in musicals the way it used to be. By Paul Gordon. Thank you very much. I'll be here all week.
That's that dark Prince of Broadway energy I've been missing. There it is.
Yeah, yeah. I have no more fucks to give. Let me just say that.
Paul is here to burn it all down on episode 8. Let's do it,
Yeah,
Paul.
yeah.
So, Paulie, what's on the agenda today? You went to LA, I went to the Connector. We are bidding goodbye to Dead Outlaw, which we admired very much of in many ways.
Yeah.
It is leaving Broadway.
Yeah. I want to talk about what we were talking about before you didn't press record. So why
Yeah.
don't you start us off on that again?
So, Paul, before I failed to press all the right record buttons, we were having a conversation and I've moved on from it, but I'm thrilled to go back. Tell me what I missed. Tell me what our listener missed.
We were starting to talk about storytelling and just musicals in general. And,
And we went back
why
to
a
the
lot
three
of
questions.
yeah, and why musicals seem to be closing so much quicker
Right.
now than they ever have before.
Yes.
and some of the basic inherent structural problems in our industry in terms of creating shows and the education or lack of education or the lack of knowledge or the knowledge that we've been getting from all the different places seems to have placed us in a world where shows, in my view, are not as creatively successful as consistently. And we started to talk about some of the Golden Age musicals and why those standards of musicals were so strong and why the form seems to be ignored or we're moving away from it, even by me. And one of the things that we were talking about before is that when we think about, I wrote down three musicals that I think really changed the face of musicals: West Side Story, Company, and A Chorus Line. Those three shows did something very different from three other shows that I want to talk about, more of the Golden Age musicals: Guys and Dolls, Damn Yankees, and Sound of Music. Those musicals were all brilliant, and we can name 5, 10 other shows in the same category that are our personal favorites. But what we were saying, what's interesting, is these musicals generally had less songs.
Yeah.
They had probably a little more book. And they were constructed, obviously, by geniuses that knew, that had been doing this for years and were at the height of their craft. And then when I think about West Side Story, Company, and A Chorus Line, those three shows changed the form. They did something different that had not been done very successfully, although I have my thoughts about the book of Company. But at the time, it was very modern and very new and worked a lot better than I felt the revival worked in terms of the book. So I think it's important to look at why certain shows were working when they did. Obviously, audiences were different and so forth. That goes without saying. But structurally, those shows are so strong. And the other thing that those shows had that I think is really important, that I think gets lost, and I think this goes all over the TV and film community and everything, is storytelling with characters that we want to follow, that we care about, that we like. Now, I'm not saying every musical you have to like the lead character. You could look at Gypsy and go, do I like Mama Rose all the time? Maybe that's a character that doesn't follow the mold as much as musicals like Guys and Dolls and Sound of Music or some of the other shows that we're talking about. The only thing that we can do as artists is to write great shows. That's our only job. It shouldn't be, what IP can I use? What movie can I get the rights to? It needs to be, what story do I want to tell? What story do I have to tell? And I think that what we were saying about just writing and not being precious and daring to suck is just, it's a very easy thing for people to go, I want to write a musical, it would really be fun. It's another thing to actually write the show. Why don't you speak a little bit to the writing process and how you approach it and how you think that relates to new writers and what you might say to them?
I think your mantra, dare to suck, is important, really important. And I think, I don't remember how much we talked about it. As long as dare to suck doesn't become don't let go of what does suck and don't learn from it.
Yes,
And I
because
think,
it doesn't mean that at all.
yeah, exactly. It's the different issues. And I think what I love about the three questions is that I feel like it applies to all of these subjects. Does it sing? Do I care? Does it have a reason for being? And I think it's when you look at what's happened on Broadway from the golden age to the three shows you've pointed out as groundbreaking to where we are now, I think the answers to those questions, what happened, to the answer to the question, what happened, is did I care? Did it sing? And did it have a reason for being? And I think it's like the other old saw of when you're an actor and you're trying to decide whether to take a job or not. There are three questions you ask: the people, the part, or the pay. And if two of those are a yes, if the people you want to work with are the people are in it or are part of it, if the part is worth doing, but the pay isn't great, you'll probably say yes because two out of three were. And
Right.
that goes across the board. And with a musical, I think if you ask the three questions, does it sing? Do I care? did it have a reason for being? If you have two of them, you have a shot at a success. If you have three of them, you may really have a success. If you have one of them, you will
See,
probably have a failure. And if all three
like,
of them have those issues, then that's very important. I think there are some shows that have all three of those issues, and I think The Connector has those three issues, for example. I think The Connector, you can apply the three questions and go, it has obstacles built in to overcome. Does it sing starts off as an obstacle because you have a milieu that is about print media in the beginnings of the 21st century. So it doesn't necessarily say it's a backstage it's gypsy and it's all about vaudeville and burlesque and backstage in theaters. That obviously sings. It is not obvious that the connector is going to sing when you start out that project because of the subject matter and where it is. But because of Jason Robert Brown's skill and brilliant imagination and his ability to create character and story through music, lyrics, and that sort of breadth of abilities that he has, it does sing, but it sings in spite of itself. And to me, that's part of what makes it so thrilling is that it is not an obvious place that is going to be. It's what Frank Lesser did in How to Succeed. He took an office milieu. It doesn't necessarily say what is this musical going to sound like? We don't know. So Frank Lesser discovered a sound. It was a Broadway sound that we'd never quite heard applied in the way it was applied, and it worked. And
so
what
this
made
is
it
a
more thrilling was that it probably shouldn't have worked, but did.
yeah. This is a great question because How to Succeed was such a standard Broadway musical that took place in an office. I feel like because that musical is embedded in my psyche, that if you do a musical in an office, it could sing because Frank Lesser did it. Therefore, it sings. If you did a musical in the South Pacific, I would say it sings because of precedent. But I think it's a really interesting question because when I look at that question, I just look at it completely, not necessarily the environment, but do these characters sing? Like, God, there's a musical that I badly want to name that I won't name that is based on a movie that everybody thinks sings. And I saw the London premiere. And when I was told this was going to be a musical, I went, these characters don't sing. Like nothing about this sings. I saw the show, got horrible reviews. Nobody sang. It was terrible. And I'm so glad I'm not mentioning the show
Yeah, I don't
because everybody loves the show now.
wow, I don't know what you're talking about.
Revival, famous name, but nobody remembers that it was absolutely awful the first time it played because these characters don't sing and they never will. But I'm so opinionated about this stuff because I find that even a lot of the musicals, these characters don't sing. This should never have been a musical. Why are you making this a musical? And I think it's such an excellent question, David, because when you look at West Side Story, like here you had these kids on the street. Like, how is this a musical? How do these kids sing? But the creators, Jerome Robbins especially, had the vision. He knew why they sang. Leonard Bernstein knew why they sang. Sondheim knew why they sang. Arthur Lawrence knew why they sang. And they fucking sang. But they were also creating something new that had never been done. They were experimenting with form. And it takes a certain kind of genius to know how to do that brilliantly.
So I was in the process of going through the three questions and applying them to the connector, which I thought was interesting. So if I may,
and then I went on a tangent about everything I hated.
I'm not going to say that's what happened. I'm just going to say what I'd love to do is just continue to apply those principles to the conversation because I think it's, at least for me, I find it interesting that we've hit on this template because I really think it's useful in assessing what may work and what may not work. What does it sing mean? And I love that you just brought up South Pacific because I think when you think of the South Pacific, immediately sounds start to come to you that were the same sounds that came to Richard Rodgers. They came out of that part of the world. There's a world music that is happening in that environment that sang to Richard Rodgers and in turn to Oscar Hammerstein. And they were able to filter that through their American musical theater Tin Pan Alley sensibility and create an incredible score musically, certainly in South Pacific. And when I think about what Does It Sing means, it means even if there had been no South Pacific, if someone comes to me and says, if someone says, I want to do a musical that's set in Latin America, you immediately know what that musical is going to sound like, right? So that we know that show is going to sing. So what's ingenious about the shows that you have, that you point to as groundbreaking is that all of them created sonic worlds that were not evident on the premise level. So when you're talking about West Side Story, what do teenage juvenile delinquents in the streets of New York City in 1958, 1959, what does that sound like? And Bernstein had an idea that it would have a combination of jazz, 12 tone atonality, and filtered through Broadway, Tin Pan Alley, and that, and his own
Right.
sort of New York sensibility. And he created something that now we take for granted, but that did not exist before West Side Story. And I think to me, that's a fascinating template to look at just what you've pointed out as your three groundbreaking shows. When you look at Company, there was not a sound for, in 1970, what did metropolitan New Yorkers really sing? What would their sound be? It would have to be filtered through the same musical theater, Tin Pan Alley sensibility that American musical theater comes from, but it would have to have some sort of newness. And where did that newness come from? Was it going to come from the Beatles? Was it going to come from the Rolling Stones? Was it going to come from Bob Dylan? No, it came from Sondheim's own imagination, his own musical training and skills, and what he found interesting. And he created a sound that now is synonymous with New York metropolitan sophistication of that era, and arguably with some book facelifts still resonates. And then the same with a chorus line. I will say a chorus line, and I was just looking at the opening number at the Tony Awards on YouTube the other day, which they, on the
Mhm.
Tonys, they did the entire opening sequence in 1975 or whenever that was. The entire 7 minute opening sequence, unabridged. And so I got to watch that again. And now, of course, does that sing? The milieu certainly does. They're Broadway dancers auditioning for a show. So right away, that one is okay. I understand what I'm gonna, that people will sing organically, that it will not feel odd or awkward that they're singing. That said, what Marvin Hamlisch did and what Michael Bennett did and what Ed Kleban did that was so brilliant there was that they took what was happening musically at the time and they found a way to apply it intelligently and in storytelling ways and in varied ways that we'd never quite heard that way before. And of course, the show itself structurally was so groundbreaking in its novelty and how it unfolded those stories and that character. And it created within it a very simple framework. We're watching people and we're going to see who's going to end up getting on the chorus line at the end. So it's got a built-in
Right.
suspense structure.
Yeah, the show did something no show had ever done before. And
Right.
that's really what I was going through for with those three shows. True, Marvin Hamlisch didn't necessarily break new musical ground, but he nailed the score is brilliant. What I was looking at with those three shows was all of those three shows did something that had never been done before. West Side Story changed the form, Chorus Line did a new concept that had never been done in musical theater. There's really no story. It's just individual stories with a through line of did we get it? And Company took montages of these little moments and based it around one guy's storytelling. That had never been done. And of course, what you said, capturing metropolitan New York with a sound and a fury that had never been done made those shows so unique and groundbreaking. And it's harder to find a groundbreaking show for me that has those three elements in it as strong.
I think they're so great that those are the ones that you picked out because I think that there are central lessons at the heart of all of them, and a lot of it has to do with the simplicity structurally of, in the case of a chorus line, that there is one central question that sustains the audience's interest from the beginning, which is actually structurally set up. I hope I get it. Sets up immediately the I want of the show. So we know immediately
Everybody has their I Want song in the first number,
in the
and
first.
that's never been done.
So what's brilliant about I Hope I Get It is, okay, I understand the milieu, I understand the characters, and I understand the want. So then one by one, as I meet them, I know what each one of them wants. So then I get to enjoy the stories about each one of them in much the way as the story itself is set up internally, which is the director is trying to get to know each one of these characters to see who he wants to be on the line. So we, in fact, become the director. We see the show from his point of view because we are casting our own chorus line in our heads as we watch the show. So the show is
That's a great
structurally
show.
set up so brilliantly to have that pay off at the end and to hold our interest. And in fact, it does that thing that I know you love and aspire to, which is let's get it all done in one act. It's a 2 hour and 15 minute one act. And I don't know if people really
That
remember.
goes by, it felt like it went by in 10 minutes.
It
So the other
does.
thing that Chorus Line did is that we'd never met these characters before in a musical.
That's right.
There'd been show business musicals, Follies, Kiss Me Kate, or whatever it
Yeah.
is. But these were authentic New York characters, and we know they were based on real people and real stories.
And real
But
interviews.
we'd never experienced that before in a musical. I don't give a fuck about the Red Shoes. First time I ever heard fuck in a musical.
Right.
First gay character in a
Yeah.
musical, heard his story. That was new. And so much about it in a musical form had never been, all of it had never been done.
All of it
I
had
mean,
never been done.
the only thing you can say is that Marvin Hamlisch didn't necessarily break musical ground, but it was
But I
still a
want to
genius.
actually challenge you on that. I want you to go back and listen to Hello 12, Hello 13. Listen to the way that thing is put together structurally. There's so much inventiveness
There
musically.
is. I don't know that it's ground. I'll go back and listen. Maybe it is. Listen, you're not going to get any complaints about that score except for "Give Me the Ball," a product of its time.
Sure.
Uh,
But I'm gonna go back to I Hope I Get It, which used a musical form that no one had ever used before, but applied it to the pop sensibility of the time, which is and employed a 6/4, an ongoing 6/4 time signature. So rather than being ba ba da bum ba da ba ba da bum ba da ba da bum ba da da, he put in those little 2/4 things, so they were 6/4 figures. So I remember, like even in 1975, like I went and looked at that score. I was 14 years old, and or 13, and I thought, oh, that's cool. Ba 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 bum bum ba 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 bum bum. So he's already not following our internal. It's just 4/4, which is all
right.
music does. All music was. That's all it was doing. Nobody was fucking around with time signatures in musical theater in those days.
Except Marvin Hamlisch was a very sophisticated composer, obviously.
That's
Like
literally.
in a way, it's interesting. Musical theater composers it's crazy when you think Leonard Bernstein wanted to write a musical. Marvin Hamlisch was scoring movies.
Yeah.
He'd never written a musical, and he went, when you think of those two guys that had never written a musical, Leonard Bernstein had, but the fact that they wanted to,
What I think is valuable is looking at what is transferable in the genius of a Bernstein, a Hamlisch, a Sondheim to where we are now is a worthy focus.
it's just about there's a lost art of music writing, and which is why we talk about the connector a lot, why we talk about the band's visit, and why I'm talking about Maybe Happy Ending, which, by the way, Jason turned me on to Maybe Happy Ending. He said, "You will love this," because he knew here's a real score, here's a real show. And to me, that show, we've talked about it on the pod, but it's just that's everything for me because that does the three things: has heart, story, and music. And I care. If you don't give me a score, I'm not going to care because then make it a TV show, a movie, or a play. Because if you don't give me a score that I want to listen to again, when I get home, then why am I there? Then what's the point? That's for me because I'm a composer and I feel that way.
But
But
I
I
think
also,
I think it's contributory to a show's success. And when I say success, I always mean it as much artistically a success, creatively a success as I do commercially a success.
but we both know that 70, 80% of the shows that have been successful in the last 10, 20 years don't have good scores.
But I want to focus on what is it that makes what
You want to focus on the positive, David, and I just want to rag on what's broken because,
you're the
you know,
Dark Prince of Broadway.
our industry is broken and we need to talk about it. Because if we don't talk about it, it's not going to get fixed. If everybody's just raw, isn't Broadway great? Look at the grosses are higher than they've ever been. I'm glad George Clooney was on Broadway. It was great. And Good Night and Good Luck is a worthy piece of our time to be seen.
That's true.
But that's not making Broadway great.
No, and actually, the celebrity thing only works for plays, right? Because you can't really, celebrities are not what make any of these musicals in terms of star celebrities like George Clooney level,
Yeah.
That you're not putting them in musicals. It's a lot more of a commitment. It's a lot more of a discipline. It's a lot harder to do 8 of those a week. And it's also a lot harder to find stars at that level
Right.
who make a difference in a Broadway musical.
And I would just use your wife, Bree, as an example. Why is she so great in musicals? Because she's been training her whole life for musicals. She's not a television and film actress that went, I can sing, I want to do a musical. Because as we know, it's not about that. And the people that don't do it for a living will never understand how much work and training it takes for a Broadway actor to do what they do. Can I also say that the sheer number of brilliant Broadway actors right now, the talent in the artistic community is off the charts in terms of designers and directors and crew and actors is still incredibly high.
I, as a writer, and I know you feel the same way, I want each role to be worthy of their time, that they got up that morning and they put on their clothes and they came into the city and they gave of their experience. And I honestly see this as our mission in things like this podcast, which, the podcast to me is connected to, I see us as teachers, and I think that we have lessons to impart so that the material that comes after us is worthy of people getting in a room and designing and directing and acting in and contributing their enormous talents to and their training to and their hearts to and their passion to. And that's why I want to talk about things like, when you bring up a chorus line, let's really talk about what is it that those artists did. And you had incredible artists who had a wealth of experience and understanding, and they went on to do other great work or had done great work before. Michael Bennett went on to do Dreamgirls, which is a really groundbreaking piece of musical theater as well, 5 or 6 years later. And what was it that they were doing that we can apply to what we can do now? Not necessarily like, a lot of people are getting their stuff through that you and I sit in front of and don't understand how it ever happened, but I do understand how it happened. There are answers to how it happened. But I don't want to not talk about those things, but I do want to focus on what are the things what are the basics that made those things work that we can apply to the
Yeah.
things now that
Well,
also work.
yeah, what I'm going to say is I'm also going to talk about the pod that I think we're going to do a little change is I think I'm going to probably do less pods and you may have guest people because clearly people listening to this, the 5 or 6 people that are listening, know that my nature is that I have a critique right now of our industry, but it's based around what I want to fix because I have solutions. We have solutions of how we could change our industry. Our industry needs to go digital. We need to do it tomorrow. We need to fully embrace digital. We are being left out of an entire industry and platform, and we could change the economics of our industry and our members in one day. And we've talked about it, I think, on a past pod, how to do that. And we can always talk about it again. We need to completely change how musicals are developed. I cannot develop a musical within the system that exists now in New York City without knowing a millionaire, without a millionaire backing me for a 29-hour reading. I can't do that. And that is destroying the development process in New York. It is not allowing new writers to find their way, to do their craft. Everything is rushed. There's not a system in place for development that is affordable for new writers without already being where you want to be. That is having a Broadway producer or a very rich backer on board. And and then finally, the actual financial structure of our industry needs to mimic the UK a lot more, even if we can't fully go there. If we do not take steps in that direction and the costs continue to be where they are, then what we are talking about is just going to get worse and worse. And right now, I'm sorry to say, I don't see any motivation on top of the unions, the Broadway League, or any of the major producers to do any of this because it's working for them. And as long as it's working for them right now, and as long as it's not collapsing, and as long as Broadway grosses have been higher than they've ever been, they are not going to change. And that's too bad for all of us. That's too bad for the people that are already successful, that want to keep thriving in an industry that's thriving. But it's especially too bad for new work and new artists and people trying to emerge now. And I think that's really a tragedy. And I hope it changes. But I just want to say that I've been really grateful to you, David, for allowing me the chance to speak my mind on these podcasts, which is, I know, is not something that everybody's going to want to hear. And I also want to say that I love talking about shows that are successful and things that have worked. But we've had 8 episodes to talk about that. And I think I've covered a lot of my favorite shows and things that I think are positive about our industry. But what I want to say to our listener is that I can talk about new stuff as it happens, but I don't have a lot more to contribute at this point based on what I've already said and what I already feel. And I think it's better for the pod and for the feeling of positivity in general and for my stress level if I come on every now and then and do a guest and we have stuff to talk about. But I think, David, what our listener is going to be really interested in is your insights. You have so much to say. Like, you could do an entire podcast about Ethel Merman, where I just want to talk about seeing Joni Mitchell and James Taylor at the Troubadour, right? Which doesn't necessarily relate to Broadway, but it also relates to the kind of music I write for Broadway. So I'm going to step back a little bit right now from our pod, hand it over to you, and I'm happy to come back whenever you'll have me. And I've really appreciated you, David. You're so smart about this. You have such an understanding and you have so much to say and so much to contribute that's positive to, I think, especially young people who would benefit so much from your knowledge. And I think this podcast is great for you to continue to explore those aspects of what you have to offer to our community, because I think it's a lot. And I'm grateful to you for including me in the pod and excited to come on and speak to you in the future.
By Paul Gordon.
Hi, Paul Gordon.
I just want to point out that so Paul and I have been in a conversation about this for weeks. So it's not like Paul didn't just come on the air like Howard Beale and blow up the podcast. We've been talking about this for a while. So the framing of this is there's going to be a little bit of a pivot, a little bit of a rebrand on My Favorite Sings, and it's going to be coming in a few weeks. And the artwork's done, the title's done, the plans are done.
Tell our listener the name of the new show.
We're going to pivot to a show called Does It Sing? With David Goldsmith.
Actually what this episode has been about.
Which is what this episode.
Nice way to pivot.
Does It Sing with David Goldsmith and friends. And I will have, Paul will be one of my friends, John Kavanaugh will be one of my friends, and a lot of my friends who are in the business who don't know yet that they're going to be my friends will come on, and we'll have some really enlightening, incredible conversations about their work and the work of musical theater. And it's going to be a lot of fun. And
I'm excited to listen because finally I'll listen to one of the podcasts because I'll be on it.
I understand. You're going to have a good time. Yeah, just wanted to just reassure everyone that what just happened was no surprise. to me, this is in the works. So this is the sort of official, unofficial announcement to subscribe, stay subscribed. My goal is to speak to our listener, who to me is that person who loves this art form. They
Yeah,
love musical theater in spite of when it's good or when it's bad. And
yeah,
and I had teachers who showed me the anatomy of what made something work, what made something not work, and why, and helped me create my own sensibility
yeah,
and create my own set of standards that have guided me toward the genuine emotional experiences that theater can provide. And when they happen, because my understanding of the anatomy of what I'm seeing is so heightened and honed and sharpened, that when all of that is working correctly, the experience that I have is worth all of the struggle, all of the sifting through, all of the difficulty of not just the career that I've chosen, but also the experience of sitting in front of theater. It makes it ecstatic when it works.
yeah, yeah. Very well.
And that gives you something to strive for. And
Yeah.
that's my goal.
And the final note that I would leave our listener with,
He knows
you
who
know,
he is.
and maybe they know who they are,
They know what they did.
that is interested in writing musicals and starting out, is again this thing that we talked about, dare to suck, which is just like you have a blank page in front of you, blank screen, whatever it is, just start writing. Even if you're not really sure what it is yet, the way to get better as a writer without taking courses, and maybe there's not a lot of great structural institutions in place to really teach you the gift. There are some, as we know, but just start writing and then start showing your work to people and then start having people come over, read it out loud to you, whether you're writing songs or not. If you're writing a musical, my greatest note is write it as a play first. Do not write a song. Do not write a lyric. Just write your musical as a play and dare to suck, which really means write your first draft. And then what I always think is a great idea, let's say you're not showing your work to anybody yet, you're too scared to, is wait a week, then go back and read your first draft. That will tell you everything you need to know. Just back away, then start your rewrite, because I will tell you, at least my process is not writing, it's rewriting. That's where the magic happens. And nothing is better than having a script in a room, just in your living room, not a professional thing. Just get a few friends over, have them double and triple parts, be in your living room or around a table and read your script out loud. And then just hear what the people that are reading it out loud have to say when you're done. And just take that in. Always see what resonates for you, not what resonates for somebody else. And if more than one or two people are telling you the same thing, maybe look at that. And then for music, what I'm going to say overall is that most people just like their own taste in music. And that's true for everybody. That's true for theater critics, for musicians, for composers, for the layman. Everybody loves their own taste in music. So it's important to know that when people are giving you feedback on your music, if you're a composer, even if they're a professional, even if they're a critic, it's just their own taste that they're responding to. And unless they actually do it for a living, if people that write songs for a living and you admire their work, those are the people to maybe listen to more because they do it and they know, and they will know the difference, as opposed to somebody who just digs their own taste in music. But all of it is subjective, because even those that are just looking at your script, they dig their own taste in script. So when people are giving you feedback, it's not who the fuck are you because you're in the room, you're my friend or whatever, but it's twofold, because it's what you said a while ago. It's like you can't just ignore everything everybody says and just go, I'm right and I know the way. Although, if you really believe that, then go for it. It is a balance. It is
It's
a
a
balance
balance.
of trusting yourself and only trusting the critique that resonates for you as an artist and as a creator.
The thing that came to mind when you were talking was the issue of your own taste and who you are as an artist. And John Kavanagh and I last week, we dipped into this subject a little bit, but I think it's really worth reiterating, which was our taste is musical theater.
Yeah.
That's who we are. And it's not everyone's taste. And certainly when John and I have, and John has a very long, storied, and continuing ongoing career with Disney that to this day he's still writing songs for them and getting Emmy nominations for and Emmy awards for. But in the case of us as a team, we kept going back and being asked back to continue to try to write songs for this franchise that was anathema to what we wrote. The Descendants franchise is very pop centered and we are very theater centered. But the day came when they needed what we did.
Yeah.
And eventually we were exactly what they needed. And I don't think there was any question when we delivered the song that they needed. That was the song they were going to put in their movie. So there's something about the story of just staying true to who you are as an artist and letting the world come to you, that a lesson is to be learned there as well.
Yeah.
And not to try and be all things to all people because that's what they would like, because you will not create the piece of art that will be creatively successful or will be a part of your legacy. And I just want to say that the song that came out of that, regardless of how it ended up getting edited and all of that and treated by the by whatever, it is a piece of material that is very much me, my sensibility, John's sensibility as writers, and I'm enormously proud of it. And I wouldn't be if I had just because I've done this. I've had the I've had the soul beaten out of my work in never in theater because you don't have to in theater, but certainly in the hundreds of songs that I've written for Hollywood, for film, for TV, for cartoons, whatnot, for animation. There's a moment where the corporate structure is just about asserting itself.
David, I'm hungry.
Yeah, you seem hungry, Paul.
Good.
I just want to thank you for these first 8 episodes. The one week you were out of town, but these first 8 episodes, they've been amazing. I can tell you, in all seriousness, I really have heard from a lot of people who love the podcast and love.
Our one listener doing assume names and just
Sure,
right.
sure, that could be. But it's been a blast. And I look forward to getting back to work on Little Dorrit and all of our other things.
Oh yeah, we're working on Little Dorrit. I was supposed to work on Act Two, and then I didn't because I went on vacation.
You know what? You've earned it, my friend.
I have.
Enjoy it.
Thank you, David Goldsmith, for this opportunity to be so negative in front of.
This has been The Dark Prince of Broadway, Paul Gordon.
Happy to do it. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you. And you'll be back,
And I'll be back.
like King George.
Jesus. All right, my friend. This has been a sincere sensation, and I love you. And till next time.
I love you like a brother.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. My Favorite Sings with David Goldsmith and Paul Gordon is a production of Virtual Stage Lab. Virtual Stage Lab was founded to create film captures of original musicals and plays to democratize how theater gets developed, seen, produced, and licensed for production. If you have a favorite sing from a musical that you'd like to have David and Paul discuss, break down, and analyze, please contact our Director of Marketing, Melody Munitz, at virtualstagelab@gmail.com. For more information and our catalog of original projects by Paul Gordon and David Goldsmith and others, go to www.virtualstagelab.com. Main title parody lyrics written and performed by David Goldsmith. End title music by Paul Gordon from the Gordon and Goldsmith musical My Improbable Sisters, starring Jenna Lee Rosen and Tony Award nominee Jasmine Amy Rogers, now available to stream for free on the Virtual Stage Lab page on YouTube. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please like, comment, and share on social media. Thank you for listening. Welcome to the community. This has been My Favorite Sings, a practically perfect, not at all corny title. Title under protest by Paul Gordon.
Are we still talking as friends now?
We
You're
are.
gonna stop.
We are. Should I end this? Wait, I
Or
wanna. I
are you gonna secretly insert this into the pod? Yeah, what are you doing later?
wow.
Yeah, yeah. What do I have to tell you? I wanted to apologize to you. I got very aggro about these workshops. See, I'm getting aggro already. All right, so I'm just apologizing for that. And that's all.
You got very aggro on the podcast today, but that's okay.
Yeah, I have no more fucks to give, and this is what's happening. And you can edit what you think is appropriate and what you think is inappropriate. I was talking about Sunset Boulevard, of course, as I think you probably figured out, which was
Oh, actually, no.
so
Now
I
I understand what you were
so I
doing.
don't know if I ever told you this. I saw Sunset Boulevard opening night in London. Princess Di, Andrew was already in the audience.
Yeah.
Princess Di walked down the center of the audience and everybody stood up. I barely knew who she was. Everybody stood up and cheered. And I was like really surprised, going, I'd never seen anybody do that in a Broadway show in my life.
Yeah.
But of course, Princess Di never went to a Broadway show that I was at.
Right.
Andrew Lloyd Webber was so jealous. He went back around, came back around so that everybody would stand up for him. And I'll never forget it.